Well, today's interview will be with Bill Small, who's a American podcaster and musician. Lovely chat, actually. Bill does a lot of work with sort of entrepreneurs, sort of business coaching and stuff like that, which he talks about a lot. So nice chat, and yeah, enjoy the show. So today I've got Bill Small on the podcast. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. So, traditional first question. What do you do?
How long do we have?
As long as you want.
I think I can narrow it down to three categories. One, I create and perform music, which I've been doing one way or another for, longer than I want to talk about, somewhere around 40 years. I also am a business and personal coach. So I help people in their businesses. And then my third job is I am the father of a 10-year-old, which is a job.
I know.
Any way you slice it, that's a job.
Exactly. Yeah, I know that one very well. Cool. So, I'm assuming the music came first then, or was there something before the music?
No, the music definitely came first. When I was, I've been told that when I was 12, I announced to my father that I was going to be a professional musician.
Cool.
Luckily, he didn't send me to military school directly after.
Right. Okay. When did you, I like to sort of track back.
Yeah.
To like the beginnings of this, because with the sort of creativity aspect of what, this obviously it's called creative, the podcast. It's nice to sort of see that journey and how that how that unfolds. So, what's your first sort of musical memories, if you like?
I think there's two, and one is I do remember music in my house a lot. Everyone could get around on the piano enough to play songs at Christmas, and we'd all gather around and sing them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
My parents they were of a previous generation. So their records were old swing records and Frank Sinatra and lots of Broadway soundtracks, things like that. And those records were on a lot. They didn't just sit on the shelf. So there's that. And then I have a very distinct memory of sitting in my room. I'm going to sound like a total nerd now, but sitting in my room and singing along with a Carpenter's record when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old.
Right.
And I knew every word. The way that Karen Carpenter phrased kind of taught me things that I didn't know I was learning. And I remember listening to that stuff and feeling like I might want to, this feels good. I want to find ways to do this.
I mean, it's sort of slightly sad that she sort of, I won't say it's been forgotten, but she was such an extraordinary musician, Karen Carpenter.
Unbelievable.
Because obviously a lot of people forget that she was an absolutely awesome drummer.
Yeah, really good drummer. And that voice, man, her voice was so thick and rich and it's really wonderful.
Because John Lennon said that she had one of the most amazing voices you've ever heard.
I agree.
And but you're saying about the phrasing, obviously being a drummer, I think that's interesting that she certainly had a way of landing a phrase, which I think maybe that that's something about her sort of style. And you mentioned Frank Sinatra because there's another guy who was good at landing a phrase rhythmically.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I really understood that until later. I like to say that Karen Carpenter was my first vocal teacher, just because I sat in my room and copied her.
It's interesting that actually you should be so influenced by a female vocalist, because yeah, that is interesting actually.
Yeah.
What's your range?
Not that.
No,
Of course,
obviously not. But
when I was 8 or 9, it was I could sing really high.
That might be
now I would say I'm probably kind of a classic baritone, with a when my allergies are not kicking in, with a decent falsetto.
Yeah. It's one of the problems with singing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There was an interview I read with one of the tenors, one of the three, opera tenors, and I can't remember which one now. And he basically said the voice is a fickle bitch, because you just don't. You can do all the work and really work that muscle and know it really well and everything else, but one day you may just show up and it just may not work the way you think it's going to.
I know that very well. So obviously that you've made the announcement that you're going to be a professional musician. There must have been a few steps before that, surely.
Yeah.
You started to think, yeah, I really like this.
I saw my school choir do a performance, and they did a Beach Boys song, Sloop John B.
Right.
Which I had heard, off in the distance somewhere. And I just thought that looked really fun. And so asked if I could join, and joined the next half of school. And I had a great choir director who picked me out of a lineup and said, "Hey, come here. I think you can sing," and gave me a solo in the next show.
Right.
Which made me think, okay, maybe I guess I can do this. It was, I don't think I usually admit what the song was, but it was from the show Oliver. It was Where Is Love from Oliver. And I just had to stand there with the piano and sing. I'd never done anything like that. And I was so nervous.
Yeah, I bet you were.
I leaned on the piano for support, kind of leaned over. My dad, sitting in the audience, thought that was just the coolest thing he'd ever seen. He thought I was being suave. Yeah. Really, I just didn't want to fall down. Yeah. But I guess I did okay, and the audience response was really good, and I was kind of hooked in that moment.
I think those sort of things are so powerful, aren't they? And interestingly, sometimes it's the other way, where people are told that they can't sing, yes. And that just wipes out their confidence and stuff like that. So you obviously had a very positive outcome, didn't you, to that?
I did.
So once you got this idea, that's what you were going to do. You must have. Would you start working towards learning an instrument and really?
I did. My oldest sister is 10 years older than me, and she had a 1968 Gibson J45 that she played, and I thought she was super cool. And she'd play, James Taylor and Todd Rundgren and all this cool stuff. And she gave me her old guitar when she got a new one and taught me 3 chords and a song. and really, I think to a large extent, every instrument I've dabbled with has been so that I can accompany myself or be in a band so that I can sing or some version of that.
Yeah. So I like this aspect of acquiring instruments. Instead of it being that you're doing the thing sort of formally, you're doing it to, as you said, be in a band or accompany yourself doing a song, which is very different from what I'm seeing with a lot of kids now, because obviously it's easy for them to say it's easy. They can go and get a lesson, but of course,
sure.
But I didn't know any guitar teachers when I started off. It's just everything you worked out yourself, and I was doing it because I wanted to be in a band, right. So it's a similar sort of thing. So you were learning enough
Yeah.
Um,
And I think my first actual guitar teacher was the next uh, choral director at school. And really what she did was printed out lyrics to Beatles songs and put the chords over them and taught me whatever new chord I needed
yeah,
and taught me to read the chord symbols in a songbook
yeah,
so I could figure out what I needed to know. And that was it. And as long as I could play songs, I was totally happy.
cool. So did you start sort of gigging around, sort of early on, or because
Uh,
obviously if you've got a voice and you've got a guitar, there's nothing stopping you, is there?
yeah, I had a couple of little bands. And by high school, yeah, I was gigging around. This, that, and the other thing.
So obviously by the time you get to that, you're really bitten by the bug, aren't you?
Yes, there's no turning back.
There's no turning back. Absolutely. And this is the thing that um, I sort of I see happening because I teach quite a lot of guitar, um, and I see it with kids when they start sort of jamming with their mates and stuff. And you think, we've
You're in
got you.
trouble now.
Yeah, it's not my fault,
Yep.
or it is. Um,
Sorry, mom.
that's right. But that sort of thing when you start to discover that part of yourself. So you got a couple of bands. So what's the next thing? Because obviously you're saying that you've been performing for a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
So
So when I left high school and wasn't immediately interested in college, because I figured if I went to college, I would probably end up screwing off and getting drunk and playing music and doing all that. So what was the point? I could do that without wasting my parents' money. Uh, so I moved back to the town or near the town I grew up in, near New York City, and just started working and playing as much music as I could. And that's when I had some of my first kind of professional recording studio experiences, learned to engineer a little bit,
okay,
got bitten by that bug too,
yeah.
of making
Now that's a
records.
bit of a jump. So what's your way in there?
My, you know, this goes to the cliche that people say it's all about who you know,
Yes,
which is completely true, by the
it
way.
is. It is
And
completely true.
so I grew up in New Jersey. I spent my senior year of high school in Oklahoma, of all places.
Right.
Uh, got out of there and back to New Jersey as quick as I could. And one of my high school marching band instructors was this really cool guy, and I reconnected with him. He got me a job as a messenger for a commercial recording studio in New York City, and he was building a little 8-track studio in Passaic, New Jersey. So I helped finish that studio, wire up all the gear, do all the stuff. I was there for the maiden voyage, all of it, and realized, wow, I'd like to learn more about doing this. I had a Fostex cassette 4-track, at home, and I'd been using that, so I already knew that it was something I wanted to play with.
Okay, that's another area, isn't it? Sound recording. It was well, we would have called it Heath Robinson, which is a guy who was like an inventor.
Mm,
But it was very much a case if you want to do that stuff, you built the studio yourself and you got on with
right.
it, type of thing.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, there was a friend of mine who I was gigging on a circuit with, and he just built a studio at the bottom of his parents' garden. And by the time we'd been going for about a couple of years, he was having bands coming over from the continent recording there, and it was like, I don't, you know, you wouldn't think of it that way, but it's just something that you did. And I suppose in those times, what sort of musical period are we talking about when you're doing all this?
84, 85, somewhere in there.
Okay,
And, we had because of where we were, we had some pretty interesting people
yeah,
show up. We had a merengue band from the Bronx come
right,
out to
right.
New Jersey and
Oh,
and do their thing, which was absolutely fascinating to
I bet it
watch.
was. Yeah.
Uh, and all kinds of young people. And then we had, I would say, 2 or 3 bands that were all incestuously using the same people. That was sort of our home base, was that studio.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously, my sort of involvement and stuff, there was obviously all the punk stuff going on
Yes.
in the UK, and then everything that sort of followed on from that. And I was quite near the Medway towns in the UK, and they had a really vibrant music scene there with a lot of sort of Medway sort of punk new wave type bands, which they called garage. Actually, that was a style of rock,
Right.
But there were a lot of quite influential bands who literally were just people that you just knew, you just knew them,
Sure, John from down the road, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But they were sort of getting coverage in places like Japan and stuff like that, which is really weird, really, because you think, well, they're just ordinary guys, very strange. But yeah, as you say, you got that sort of thing of all these, as you say, incestuous things where you got this band, but those guys are in that band, and
Right.
and so it goes on. Yeah. So yeah, it's really good. So did you do a lot of sound work then, engineering work?
Eventually, not then. I did end up going to college. I went to Berklee College of Music for a couple of years.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And then
what, studying engineering?
No, actually studying voice.
Oh, okay.
And then I was playing in New York a bunch, so I left to just go keep playing. I didn't finish at that time. And then spent a summer in Chicago running around the blues clubs. Kind of caught that bug a little bit. Really, I found that kind of music really informative and instructive for me, especially as a guitar player. Really, really fun. And then ended up back in New Jersey for a couple of years, mostly playing, and then moved to Texas.
Which is where you are now.
That's where I am now.
Yeah, cool. So the next sort of thread of this I'm fascinated by, because this interests me a lot. You were saying about musicians as entrepreneurs, because obviously what you're doing as a sort of a business coach or advisor, whatever.
Yeah.
So when did you start seeing the link there about the creativity of music and that way of thinking applied to business? What was
much
it?
later, much later than I wish I had. I didn't, people would say some version of you have a business. And for a while I did do a lot of recording work, and had always had a project studio, had a studio like outside of my house for a while, but I still don't know if I really understood what that meant. And in the 90s, I did some kind of personal development work. I did some workshops and things like that. And I actually got trained to coach people. But I didn't know that was a thing.
No.
I had no idea that was like a thing you could do. It was just part of what we were doing in our learning.
Okay. And, so can I stop you there, Bill?
Yeah.
What took you to that? Because that's quite, this is quite a bit of a jump from like suddenly you can start coaching.
Yeah, well, I think it's, look, you spend 15 years beating the bushes, playing every night. When I first moved to Texas, I think I played 4-hour gigs 6 nights a week for 3 years without stopping.
Right.
And then, some version of that continuing on with cruddy jobs and then doing only music, but always it always felt like a real struggle. And I think at one point, I just didn't really feel like I was getting anywhere. And I had friends who had tripped on to, all right, how do we get better? How do we just get better as people and in what we do and everything else? And that kind of led me to my own, and I think I'd always been doing a little bit of it on the side, but my own journey of kind of self-discovery and personal development, and how do I just be better at everything I'm doing?
Mm, mm. When I was about 18, I went on a masterclass with Barney Kessel,
Mm,
the jazz guitar player. It was like a four-day masterclass, and because there was nothing like that, I'd never come. It was just sort of so different.
yeah,
But the first day, he just spoke about the psychology of, performance, creativity, and I was hooked.
yeah,
And that really got me realizing that these people that were at that level of people like Kessel, Oscar Peterson, and all that sort of crowd,
sure.
they're like athletes. They every nuance of something that improves their ability to think is important. I mean, that's sort of a bit ironic because obviously a lot of them had drug problems at one point in their life or whatever. But it was just that you've got to have the edge somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that artists sort of get. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And, you think about it, and I didn't put all this together for a long time, but when I'm on stage, when you're on stage and you're performing, the worst thing you can do is get in your head, so to speak. Start
yes.
worrying about things, thinking about things, doing whatever. Next thing you know, you're screwing up, right?
Yes.
The minute I ask myself what's coming next, I'm going to play the wrong thing.
Yes.
But when I can allow myself to just be really present in the moment and kind of ride the wave, if I'm playing, that's kind of what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
You're just riding the wave and not ask myself too many questions about it. There's always some other dialogue going on up there.
Yeah.
But I just let it roll. And that's going on while I'm doing this other thing, and just stay really present. Everything goes really well.
Yeah.
And the more I train my ability to do that, the better I play, the better I sing.
Yeah. I mean, this is an area that I think is like really, really important and not covered very well, because it's one of those things that it's difficult to sort of pin down, isn't it? That sort of flow state stuff, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I do a lot of NLP, and that's what brought me into that, was this sort of thing of, I'd already been doing stuff like that, but it wasn't until I started to see sort of Bandler's work that I sort of came, oh, I recognize this. And then, of course, I use that a lot when I'm sort of coaching kids or, people that you get them playing in bands and stuff. Because adults are terrible, aren't they? They just have to think about everything. And of course, it's the education system that's that thing of, you've got to analyze the thing, but it actually, you just got to be in that, letting things happen. And sometimes things go wrong, but that's okay. But how you respond to that and flow with it, and sometimes interesting things come out of that, and that sort of, that experience, I think, obviously, it's not just to do with music; it's to do with absolutely everything. Just having that ability to respond to sort of life.
Every business owner across every industry that I've ever worked with, and it's across a lot of different industries, it's the same conversation. The circumstances are different. The outcomes are different. What they're looking for is different. The conversation is the same. Is getting out of your head, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is getting into this moment right here, because that's the only moment that's actually happening. Nothing's happening next, as far as we know. Whatever already happened, that's gone. So being here in what you're doing is so important, and we don't. It's not something that we're taught to do necessarily when we're kids in school or anything.
Oh no, it's not.
but
Not
it's huge. And I do think you said something really cool in that, how you feel like artists kind of get that. And I think even if we can't language it, I think it's one of the reasons that I kind of understood it and was always looking for a language for it, because I had felt it. I felt it in that moment when I had to lean on the piano
yeah,
and sing my song. You know, there was something about the beingness of that moment and being really present in that moment and just doing this thing. And that was all I was doing in that moment. That has always been a part of playing music.
I I totally get that. And the other interesting thing, because when I was talking to people about that, when you're in that moment, you get this sort of weird telepathy that happens between people in a
Absolutely.
band, don't you? I mean, this is like
Yeah.
pretty normal. You
Yeah.
know, you just know that that drummer's going to do a particular, paradiddle or something. You just know that that's going to happen. You're not. You can feel it coming.
Yeah.
And that's what I was sort of saying to people, that because they haven't been introduced to that idea of being present, just with what's happening, and not analysing anything, just being aware. It seems very odd. But they can understand it. Often a lot of kids understand it because of sport, that you can't possibly think fast enough. And it's obviously true with music. You can't possibly think fast enough.
Yeah.
To play the next thing. It's what you've trained yourself to do. And then you just have to be allowing those things to flow. But when people experience that for the first time, it's transformational, I think.
Without question.
Mm.
I just spent 15 years in a band. And, we had some membership changes along the way, but the last kind of inception of the band lasted quite a while. And we were not really known for our willingness to rehearse. We'd show up and somebody'd say, "Hey, I got a song. This is the key. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go." And I've had the experience of playing with those people, and we would be playing things together that we never talked about playing together. We're trying to make each other laugh. Everybody's listening so deeply and so openly that you can go anywhere. You can do anything. As I was actually the bass player in that band most of the time, and I could change arrangements just by what I was playing. I could push the band in another direction. So could the drummer, so could the guitar, one of the guitar players. We could all do that. And that's such a special thing. And it's, to me, I think it's a great training in how to work with people,
Yes.
in how to work with people in any situation or any team, is when you have that shared goal. There was something we were trying to do, which was mostly, not suck, and play the song really well and have it feel really good. And you have this ability and willingness to listen really openly. And everybody knows what their job is and knows their lane and knows what to do. Amazing things happen.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I've been, when I sort of run these sort of summer schools and stuff like that, I have to say to the more, the adult members of that you can take these ideas and use them in business. I mean, apart from the fact that getting up and doing public speaking is one of these sort of things that makes a lot of people panic. But of course, once you've got used to performing, it's the same. It's the same idea. It's that idea that it's okay to be watched.
Yes.
And a lot of the tricks, of course, that people on radio, how do they manage to speak to so many people? Well, to them, they're only talking to their mum.
Right.
All these little ideas. So that's really cool. So when you said you obviously did some sort of coaching, you were mentioning that you did some sort of coaching course or something.
Yeah.
So did you then, once you got that under your belt, did you get into that quite quickly, or?
No, not at all. Uh, that was in the 90s. It wasn't until 2008. That band that I mentioned, we had just finished a year of, kind of putting out our first record and playing a whole lot of shows for not enough money and, that whole thing that people do often.
Yeah.
I got home from a lot of running around. January and February, it was always a slow time for shows and things like that. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine who's a filmmaker, but I also knew him as a coach, as somebody who was really good at that. We'd done some of the same coursework together, and that's how I knew him. And he told me he just got a job, which amazed me because this is not the kind of guy who has a day job. Like, he never had a day job the whole time I knew him. I said, "You got a job? What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm working at this company, coaching people, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And we hung up, and I thought, wait a minute. Did he just say he's coaching people and they're paying him money? So I called him back and said, "Are they hiring?" And sure enough, I ended up working for a company who at that time, so this was 2008, was providing coaches for some prominent authors and speakers who'd been in who had books. They'd all written books, and they were all in a book called The Secret, which
All right.
was
Okay.
really
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really big at the time.
Yeah.
And
It was. Yeah. Yeah.
so we provided coaches for their coaching programs.
Right.
And I went from 0 to 37 clients at once in 30 days.
Wow. Wow.
And over the course of the next 18 months, probably coached close to 100 people, one on one, just like this. And when you do something like that, you either find out that you love doing this or you never want to do it again.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah, and I really loved it. It was
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
awesome. But by mid 2009, given the state of the world and the economy, people were not shelling out big dough for coaching programs.
Mm.
That company fell away. I had already left, I think, by mid 2009. But it was something that I knew I liked to do. I knew I could get paid to do it. So I just kind of always had a client or two on the side. And then we had a child.
Right.
And
Changes everything.
it does indeed. And I needed to regulate my income a little more. And I also wanted to see what taking the pressure off of music would do. Because
Yes.
I'd been slogging it out for a long time at that point. And I'd learned a lot of things that I could get paid to do, but I didn't really want to do anymore. And I had done an awful lot of things from, having a recording studio. I installed PAs in venues. I built a venue. I managed a venue. I booked a venue. Just all of these, anything I could do really in music that paid money that I thought I could get away with, I would do.
Yeah.
And that was, had run its course for me. So I got a little more serious about the coaching business. I realized that of the clients that I had, the ones I had the most fun with were business owners. There was a lot of meat there. And business is personal, personal is business when you own your own business. It
Yes.
all rolls up together. And the only thing that ever gets in your way is you.
Yes.
And the one thing that I became good at doing was walking people through how they get in their own way and then helping them try to get to the other side of that. And it was the most fun for me to do that inside of people's businesses. So that's what I focused on. It's what I still focus on. And it's been great. It also, it did take the pressure off of music, from a financial standpoint.
Mm.
You still have to pay me, but it became a whole lot more fun.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Because I did something very similar, in as much that my focus really was on teaching music. Because again, I had a family.
Sure.
And I couldn't really tour. It just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
I had 4 kids, and 2 horses or 3 horses, and so that wasn't, and yet I had the closest thing to a real full-blown touring band, that was.
Yes.
But it was one of those things where the thing sort of evaporated at one point, and I thought, right, okay, so I sort of focused in on the teaching. So I was still playing, but I wasn't sort of traveling very far. But those sort of decisions are quite important, I think, that you have to make in life. And of course, what I realised, it's only sort of in hindsight I realised how flexible you are as an artist. That you can fit things, you can fit your work around a family.
Yes.
You can start early, get home to pick them up from school, and then do something in the evening. I mean, it's like the whole thing is completely. I couldn't imagine another business that another sort of career that you could sort of do that with very easily.
I take my son to school every day.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, exactly. That was the thing. I used to take my girls to when they were doing sort of netball tournaments and stuff like that. And I absolutely loved it. It was just something about that connectivity about things.
And I think I was fortunate in that the band that I was in for 15 years, our fearless leader that the band came together around is a songwriter named Walt Wilkins, who's he's one of my favorite songwriters. Of course, we're close friends at this point, and we still play together and do some touring together. But at that time, he had a young child.
Yeah.
And one of the first things he said was, look, I need to tell you all now, I'm not going to go on the road for 3 months or something. I'm not doing that. I can't do it. And we still, at that time, I think, I did my last longish run, which was about a month, 20 some odd days after I had a child, but realized I was like, I don't even want to do that now.
That's right.
It's not the same.
No.
We do 2 weeks, usually in the Netherlands in the fall, about every year. And that's about as long as I'm going to go.
Interesting. So, what you were saying about the type of people you like working with, I mean, what could you say about your sort of approach to coaching? What sort of things that have you sort of discovered that you see quite a lot in when you're talking to people?
Well, there's some commonalities. I mean, you'll hear me say a lot, some version of. There's 3 things I talk about a lot. One, that you're the only thing that ever gets in your way. That's a big one, because it's really true. And I don't care who you are, what level you're at. I don't care if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. If you're having difficulties, if you're have a lot of challenges or producing outcomes that maybe aren't what you're looking for, the only place to look is inside, not outside. The answers are not out there. They're always in here. And then the other thing, and I forgot to ask you this at the front, how do you feel about cussing? How do you feel about...
Oh, it's fine. It's okay.
Great. Your brain is an asshole.
Yeah.
Your brain is not your friend.
Yeah.
The primary mission of your brain is to keep your body alive. And we live in this world now where keeping your body alive is relatively easy. When I walk out the door, there's not a lot of danger of a wild animal coming and, ripping me apart. So your brain does a lot of things to you that if someone else did that to you, you would not hang out with them.
No, that's...
So that's part of it, is sorting that out and being able to differentiate between you and the ugly voice in your head, because they're not the same thing. You are not the voice in your head.
Well,
and then the last really pragmatic thing is, and this is great for musicians, and this is the case with every business owner I've ever worked with or talked to. I will ask them, where do you want to be in 5 years? Nobody can answer the question. And if you don't know where you want to go, how will you know when you get there?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of reference NLP stuff here.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I interviewed a guy called Alistair Duncan, who does NLP, but from a more of a sort of Grinder perspective, which slightly went sort of down another route slightly. And he was saying about, really, it's all about your internal representation of things, which is like you're saying,
yeah,
the voice in your head. But like how you see the world and how you respond to the world, it's you. Yeah. It's not the world, because a lot of people are going like, it's them, whatever it is, the government or the whatever you want to sort of point at.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it always keeps coming back to, well, that stuff's there. What's your response?
Right.
And as you say about what your body's doing when it feels like it's under threat, it isn't really under threat at all, is it? It's not like you're going to be, as you say, you haven't met a saber-toothed tiger. But your body's still responding as if there is a saber-toothed tiger out there.
Yes.
And I see that obviously with people doing exams. Because I have to do, I examine for
sure.
Music. I'm a music examiner, and it's one of these things I'm a bit ambivalent about, because you need a journey, you need a destination, which is like your 5-year thing, but you need that examination date. But in actual fact, it's not the actual exam that's the thing; it's the journey. Yeah. And people find that really difficult to get, because I'll say, right, okay, if it all goes wrong, I'll say tits up, on the day, because it can happen.
Right? Sure. You can just have a bad day.
Yeah. But if you've done the work, you've passed the exam, basically. It doesn't matter whether you get the piece of paper at the end. You've done the work. It's the journey that's the important bit, because you wouldn't learn all these scales that, who wants to learn scales?
Right. I still don't want to learn them.
Exactly. Who wants to learn all that stuff and arpeggios and stuff? But of course, that's your toolkit. But you wouldn't do it unless you had to do that stuff.
Right.
But people find that rather difficult, because they think that the exam is the thing that's important.
It is the thing, right?
Yeah. But it is a destination. That's the point about it.
And even with any schooling, don't we do that? Where we think graduation is the destination. No, it's really not. It's
absolutely.
What do you want to do with it?
Exactly.
What are you going to do then?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the 5-year plan, or that sort of thing about the vision, again, that's another important thing of like knowing where your sort of directionality is, if you like. Where are you going? Because if you want to do that thing, but you're going that way, then you're not going to get that thing,
right?
So and obviously a lot of that stuff just seems really obvious, but it's not.
It's not.
It's
all. Obvious once you know it.
Yes, and you've experienced it, and you look at it, and I think that's really, really important points. And there was one other thing that you actually, when we were sort of bouncing emails backwards and forwards, and I thought this was really good. You come up with this thing called choice paralysis. Now that's totally one of the things that I think is something that people just really like. It's almost like we've had a game played on us about this idea of choice.
Yeah.
What do you say to people about that?
Well, that relates right back to that vision conversation. How do you choose? Well, where do you want to go? If we put it back in the music sphere, so let's say you're a young musician. The first thing I want to know is what do you want? What are you trying to do? Do you want to be famous? Do you want to just work, as a musician and make good money? Do you want to just build a small following and do that if you're an artist? What's the goal? Because you're all going to be faced with the same choices. As far as, do I need to go play live shows? Do I need to focus on TikTok? Do I need to maybe you're the kind of person that with your age and wherever you are, the best thing for you to do is audition for every talent show that's on TV. Go do it. If that lines up with your vision. If you don't have that, it's really hard to make a choice. Once you have an idea of where you want to end up, making a choice becomes easy.
My sort of line on that one is, I'll say to them, "What's your dream?"
Yeah.
And they go like, "Oh," and then they'll feel a little bit embarrassed and go, "Well, I'd like to be in a band." Really? What's that? Because anybody can be in a band. What's that going to do? What do you dream about? What is it? And once you get them to sort of go, whatever it is, I want to be a rock star. Right. Now we know.
Right.
Now we know
that's
where
a
we're
different
going.
thing. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Or I want to just be able to write songs and serenade women. Great. Brilliant.
Great.
That's the thing.
Let's work on that.
Sort of thing. It's almost like, let's get the sort of the intellectual bit out of the way,
right.
and the sort of the polite bit out of the way. Let's just get down to what's going to drive that.
Yes.
Drive that thing. Because I think that makes helps people make choices.
Absolutely.
When they're sort of honest with what it is they really want.
And that can be difficult, to be honest about what you really want.
And I'm sure that must be true with business, is it not?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And oftentimes, just like musicians, businesses start because you're good at doing something, you're interested in doing something, you find out that you can get paid to do it, so you do that a little bit, and the next thing you know, it's 10 years later and you've been running this business for 10 years.
Yeah.
And you haven't really given a lot of thought to where you're headed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like the thing that starts as a hobby.
Yeah.
And then obviously a lot of people have to realize that you have to make different decisions about, what's the hobby decision and what's the business decision.
Right.
And
I have another friend who, he used to tell me, I hate my job, but it's okay. I'm good at it. And it affords me the money and the time and the life I want to do all the other stuff I love to do. I said, well, I can't really argue with that.
No.
That's great. Yeah.
As long as people will understand that. I'm just wondering whether that's what people actually realize that. Because at least if you know that's what you do, that's why you're doing it, then you make time for the things that you really want.
Yes. Which I've watched this guy for 30 years. He always does that. Always.
So it doesn't just take over his life, basically.
Right.
Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of people, their job takes over and they don't have anything other than their job.
Right.
Which is sad if you don't like doing
If you don't like your job, that's not a great place to be.
Yeah. So your podcast.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
The subtle art of not yelling.
Yes. I've listened to a few episodes, but it's really, really good.
Well, it came out of, I met a young, I hate to call him a marketer, but that's what he was calling himself when we met, a young marketer about a year ago. And we had a fantastic conversation where we basically spent about an hour and a half bashing all forms of internet marketing and all the courses and classes and stuff out there that we had been involved in and we knew all about. And we just tore it apart for about an hour and a half. And I said, oh, I like you. We should keep talking. And we did a little work together. And on some phone call, I said something like, I'm toying around with the idea of having a podcast. I think I had been doing a regular thing on Clubhouse. Are you familiar with the Clubhouse app?
No, not.
It's one of those, it's a audio only social app. I haven't been on it in a year now, I don't think, but where you just, you get people together and have a conversation. So I had been hosting these rooms, so to speak, in Clubhouse and found that I really enjoyed it. I like to talk. I'm pretty good at talking. It worked out. So I was toying with the idea of a podcast, and he said, "Me too." And I prefer not to do things by myself. I get really tired of me really fast. It's why one of the reasons I like to be in bands. So I just immediately said, "Great, why don't we do it together?" And so we did. We launched in September. Basically, the premise, though I think it's a moving target on some shows, is how do you grow a business and create and keep doing all the things you want to do and be successful at that without having to be the loudest person in the room, without having to be that annoying, person saying, "Look at me, look at me, look at me" all the time. Because some of us are just not cut out for that.
No.
And a lot of the more tried and true marketing techniques, they require some version of that. And that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for him. And it doesn't work for a lot of people.
No. That's interesting, that, because, this is often said, isn't it, about when people say marketing, people go like, it's like somebody's unclean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you get that sort of idea of the person who's good at marketing is the type of person that you don't really want to spend an awful lot of time with, if you saw what I mean. Which in actual fact is unfortunate, because really nothing really happens unless you sell something.
We're all selling something.
Of course we are.
Even if we're not selling something, we're selling not selling anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think if we understand what that process is, that makes a lot of difference to people. Because really it's a case of, if somebody has got to need something to be sorted out, whatever that thing is, they need to know that there's somebody out there who can do that thing.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's really that simple, but well, I think it's that simple. But again, how do you find those people? And actually, in fact, I think it's got even harder.
I do too.
It's got so noisy.
Yeah. And that's part of the deal, is how do you rise above the noise without yelling, without having to jump up and down and spend a lot of money and a lot of time and make a lot of noise? How do you build something outside of that?
Yes.
And that's at the heart of what we talk about. But because it's me, partially, there's a lot of musicians and creators. We get on there. We talk a lot about the creative process and how people manage that along with everything else, because that can be challenging.
It is, yeah, very much so. Yeah, so you've had quite a few people on as well, haven't you?
We have. We just released our 20th episode, and we're kind of booked out for a little while,
good.
Which is great.
That's great. It's good.
It's been fun.
So, no book yet?
All right. So, funny story. In 2011, I wrote a book, very short, and I put it on Kindle. I forgot all about it. In 2018, my synapses must have fired again, and I remembered it was there. I pulled it off of Kindle and did a little bit of a revision, and then I must have got sidetracked again. And in February of this year, I found it again. Did revision number 3, still working on that, and hope to have it edited and out before the end of the year. But it's not specifically about coaching. It's actually about the non-technical aspects of recording music.
Oh, cool.
Because I noticed that whenever people talk about recording and making records, all they talk about is gear.
Yes.
And quite frankly, gear doesn't mean a thing.
No.
I'll take the crappiest gear you got and I can still make something sound good.
Yes.
And I think that's an important focus. And
I think it's brilliant.
There's some things to do in there. So trying to get that finished. And I noticed in the process for me of writing is really difficult. I feel like I've spent 40 years, literally, or longer, as a songwriter, trying to say as much as possible with the fewest words. And so trying to write something where you're really almost required to have more words. People are like,
Yes.
it is short. Say more. I can't say more. I don't
No.
know what to say. And if you were standing or talking to me about it, yes, I would expound forever. But that I'm still really working on that
I know. I know
ability.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Because I'm just finishing a book, but I did a book a few years ago, which was my, a first book is like, oh, okay, you make all your mistakes, don't you?
Yes.
But it was that idea of, I just want to say it and that's it. But I don't want to tell people what I'm going to tell them, and then tell them what I'm going to tell them, and then tell them that I've told them the thing that I've told.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just doesn't do me any favors.
Me neither.
So I've tried to organize this in such a way that I don't do that. It's just like, that's the thing, so I've done them as essays effectively.
Yes.
But no, I know that, because you are right. You're crafting a song. You want an idea and it needs to be succinct.
Yes. You're trying to get the, this almost visual impact in one line. And that's all I've ever thought about. That's what I've been working at, that skill, not the other one. So the great thing is doing things like this, being on the podcast, being on other people's podcasts, talking more, writing more. I did put a writing habit on the books this year, not specifically to get anything done, but to keep finding my voice, to keep honing that ability to just get stuff out and onto paper. I did. I mentioned that I went to Berklee College of Music in the 80s, where I did not finish. I actually finished my degree at the end of last year because I decided, why not? Let's do that. Might want to be like you and teach someday.
Yeah.
So I thought that might help. And I did get to do a lot of writing inside of that, which I think kind of helped as well.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I've always find interesting is going back to do something that you did a long time ago. There's it does a strange thing to your head somehow. It's like you've reconnected back to a part of yourself that you'd sort of lost.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. I've had a few things happen to me in the last 2 or 3 years like that, and it's almost like, it's like you're connecting up the circle somehow, and it's given me lots of new ideas. It's like it's sort of invigorated ideas. So it's great. Well, Bill, that was brilliant. I'll put some stuff on the show notes about how people can contact you and your podcast and everything. And all the very best with what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
That was a lovely chat, and lots of things. I thought, I know that one.
Well, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Certainly. That's brilliant.
Thanks again.
See you soon. Cheers. Be sure to check out Bill's podcast called The Subtle Art of Not Yelling. The links are on the show notes, and it covers some really good subject areas. So, particularly from the perspective of musicians as well, there's a couple of things on there which are really, really good. Okay, so that's good. On the show notes, there's also stuff about Patreon, and I'm doing a whole bunch of things to do with NLP and musicianship. So be sure to check that out. And I'll see you next time. Bye.